classes, never in a rush. Compile it.
It's been a while since I made a video on my game engine because I kind of got a little distracted, but I've been making a ton of progress on it. The first thing I wanted to talk about is performance because in my last game engine video, I talked about how I had around 7 to 10,000 FPS and around 200,000 CPS, which is cycles per second. I kind of made that up myself. It's basically how many times I can calculate the game logic, and FPS is how much it can render to the screen because it's multi-threaded. But I was using STD Chrono to calculate FPS, but FPS was so high it couldn't accurately calculate it. So it's actually giving me a bigger number than I was actually getting, and I'm actually getting around 5 to 6,000 FPS. So I had to optimize it. I first started with getting rid of indices because since I moved to triangle strips, indices is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So getting rid of those gave me a couple hundred FPS. The second thing that I got rid of was projection because I followed a tutorial that was setting it up for 3D, but I only needed 2D, and so I didn't actually need projection because 2D projection is always just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. No big deal, a couple extra thousand FPS, so I was up to 7 to 8,000 FPS. And then what I did was I decreased memory usage. Sprites were taking up a bunch of memory, so I lowered that. Textures were taking up a bunch of memory. I lowered that, and there's a couple of unused variables and unused functions hanging around my program. And I did a bunch of other optimizations too, and I got up to around 7 to 9,000 FPS. And if you don't full screen it, sometimes you could get 10,000 FPS. I don't know if it's possible anymore because I've been adding a couple of extra stuff, but I'll talk about that later. Also, I removed a bunch of the standard libraries from my code, like std array. You can just use C-style arrays, lower compile times, and lower the executable size. I removed a bunch of other standard libraries like stdint.h, I think I removed. I had to remove it out of GLFW and out of Vulkan as well, but it was definitely worth it because I never used it anyways. So also what I did was I removed GLM, which was basically it's like one of the big 3 libraries I was using to get my game running. GLM is just a bunch of math, and I kept it in there because I saw Vulkan was using it, but then I deleted a bunch of stuff out of Vulkan. And then I was the only one using GLM, and so I was like, I don't think I actually need this anymore, so I got rid of it. It took a while to get rid of it because I was using it in like every single file I owned. I also switched from C++17 to C++23, which I don't know if that was a good idea or not because I don't think I'm using any of the 23 features, and I think it's just bloating up my program. But I also added square collision. What my collision did before, looped through all the vertices of both sprites that you were trying to collide with, and would create a bounding box around both of them, and then check if the bounding box was collided. But I use squares for all my sprites because I use textures, because I just map a texture onto them and then you don't need all the extra vertices. And so I was like, surely since they're already squares, they're already axis aligned bounding boxes. And sure enough, they are. So that boosted my CPS from 200,000 to 300,000. And also increased CPS by 100,000 again by removing the Vulkan debug messenger. I thought I had already removed it, but apparently I didn't, and it wasn't actually doing anything because whenever I ran into an issue with Vulkan, it never actually told me what the issue was, and I had to brute force it and struggle for days on end by myself. So I got rid of that, and now I'm up to 400,000 CPS. So yeah, the last thing I did was font rendering, which I've actually been working on this for quite some time. I've actually been working on it since I posted my creating a game with Vulkan and C++ video, which was over 2 months ago. I spent like a week trying to get font rendering to working to display your score. In fact, the variable for score is still in my code. I just never got around to actually using it. I tried again in the audio video, but I couldn't get it to work again. It was supposed to be an audio and font rendering video, but I spent 2 weeks trying to get it to work then, and I couldn't get it to work, and I burned out. So I dropped it for like a month, and I came back to it, and I fixed it in a day. What I would do before is to create a new sprite for every single character, but I realized that's super inefficient. I think that's what Minecraft used to do, and it would have your performance every time you open the F3 screen. But I made it so that it creates a texture based on the input text, and it'll map it to a single sprite, which is just a square. The problem with this, though, is that I don't have dynamically creating I don't have dynamically creatable textures. I have dynamically creatable sprites, but textures is a whole nother beast because you can't just allocate a bunch of textures because you don't know what the textures are going to be. And unlike sprites, where you can just you already know exactly what a sprite is, you don't know exactly what a texture is. What I thought I had to do was recreate the entire render system, which I didn't feel like doing. But I ended up doing it anyways, and I did it in like 10 seconds by just copy and pasting all the render system creation functions again. Then, whenever I changed what text said, I was like a 3-second delay where the game would just freeze. So I was like, this is not performant. I need it to run real time so you can make games like Cookie Clicker. I managed to realize that you don't actually have to recreate the entire render system. You only have to recreate the texture array descriptor sets, and that made it run real time. I realized that you only change one texture when you change what a font says, and it was recalculating all 66, and I have 66 of them because low-end devices like Chromebooks can only handle 66 for some weird reason. Anyway, so I made it so that you can change the descriptor set instead of creating a new one, which is much more efficient. And now it only halves your CPS if you call it every second, I mean, which is still kind of slow, but you still get around 200,000 CPS. But I want it to make it so that it runs around 200,000 CPS if you change it every frame, but I'll probably come back to it later. And one last thing, I added camera zoom. So if you decrease it, everything will get zoomed in. If you increase it, everything will get zoomed out. Anyway, yeah, bye.